It's a tremendous honor to be able to introduce Blanca Rubio to all of you, and I think probably a lot of you already know her. She does come to our community fairly frequently. Mayor Thompson was unable to come today. He sends his regrets. He had another commitment that he couldn't make it, so I have the honor. Blanca was elected to the State Assembly in November of 2016, and she was re-elected. Nobody ran against her in 2018. So that is a statement as to the good work she's doing for us, I believe. She represents the 48th Assembly District, which Glendora is part of. She was born in Juarez, Mexico, and came to the United States with her parents and siblings, a number of siblings, at a young age. She received her bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in education from Azusa Pacific University. So she's familiar, yes, with this neck of the woods. She was a teacher in Baldwin Park Unified for 16 years, and she mentioned this morning that she sort of went into, I have to get ready for my classroom again mode, just recently. She spent 20 years in elected office. She served on the Valley County Water Board, which has been a big plus for us in Glendora who are so overwhelmed with the water issues that are facing us and in the region as well. She understands them and understood them right off the bat when she was elected. And she also served as a member of the Baldwin Park Unified School District. She is a resident of Baldwin Park and a proud mother of 2 children, 10 years and 11 years old, so she definitely knows how to multitask. As an Assemblywoman, Blanca places advocacy for children, women, families, students, and immigrants at the forefront of her work. From my perspective and others who she's worked with since she's been elected, she is very responsive, informed, highly energetic, smart, and committed to representing all of her constituents. She's assembled a quality group of staff members who are here in the area when she isn't able to be. Leah has been representing us very well, and I understand we have a new representative, Taylor, who will be representing our area. We'll see him around more. Blanca understands the importance of establishing good communication and working relationships with her colleagues. And with that, she has been very successful in moving forward some very important bills. She is known now as someone that the other representatives could trust. She says she's going to do it, she does it. And she is able to very passionately help move bills forward. So we've found great help in her. Again, with the water situation that we have, she authored a bill that the San Gabriel Valley COG's Water Committee asked her to help with. We are sponsoring it, the COG is sponsoring it, and it successfully has moved through both the Assembly and the Senate with unanimous votes, not one no vote. It's waiting to get onto the floor now, so we have great hopes, and thank you so much, Blanca, for your help with that. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Blanca Rubio.
Thank you very much. Well, I just have to say I got out of my house this morning and there was stuff on my car. And I'm thinking, am I confused? Because I just came from Sacramento last night and yesterday morning when I woke up, there was stuff on my car in Sacramento, and I'm thinking, wait, I thought I had jet lag. And lo and behold, no, it's ashes here too, ashes up north. I don't even know what's going on when you go out on both Northern California and Southern California, and there's ashes in our cars. So first and foremost, I want to thank the first responders who are actively fighting fires up in Northern California and down here. I don't know what we would do without their continued support. I know that there's firefighters and just safety personnel coming from all over the country to help. But I'll tell you a quick story before I get started. I belong to the Women's Caucus, and there was a trip today to go fly fishing. A lot of our male colleagues want us to partake in things that we wouldn't normally take advantage of. So I said, I had a thing with my Glendora folks, so I can come. And so I was on a flight last night with one of the representatives. Brian Dolly represents Reading. And so he's like, getting texts, and I said, what happened? He goes, the Women's Caucus got evacuated from their hotel because of the fires. So thank you for bringing me here. Instead of letting me have to go all the way over there and get evacuated. So anyway, so that's what's happening across the state right now. So thank you for being here this morning. I thank you, Judy, for that introduction. I was just commenting that this will be the end of my second year already. Like, Elizabeth and I, we've got 2 years gone, and I do not have an appointment. So I still have an election in November, so I'm not officially elected yet. But November 6th, and I will be with you for another 2 years, and I'm working very hard, making sure that I represent all of you so that I can represent you for the next 10 years. The terms now have changed from 6 years to 12 years, and when I came into this position and I spoke to many of you, I represent everybody. I have a passion for public service. I have this is my 21st year in office, and I joked that I was 12 when I started, just because but the ability to represent your technology is just incredible. The energy that I have is twofold. One is that 10-year-old and 11-year-old future. But more than that, I'm so excited to be able to really make a difference. And I've spoken to many people, sometimes you don't have their but when it comes to bills and representation, if I can't be with you, I will always have an answer of why not. I may not agree with it, but I will give you an answer as to why I do things that I do. And I know this is going to come up, it's going to come up, one of the biggest issues facing us right now is that this week on the gas tax. Now, Governor Healy, it has done a lot for the communities, and I will bring it up later in the conversation, but I have a list of all the projects that are being completed because of that money and how much it's helped us in San Diego Valley. We'll go ahead and get started. As you stated, I'm your Assemblywoman Blanca, Rubio, and I represent the East San Diego Valley, and I have a very eclectic communities. I have, Glendora, I have Almani, Baldwin Park, Irwindale, so I have bedroom communities, and I have Irwindale is industrial. I also represent a little portion of city of industry, and so they're my constituents as well. And so for me, I had to take the time to really sit down and look at what was happening and really evaluate the needs of the communities and what I could do for certain communities. One brush does not cover everybody, and so I've been, thanks to my staff, they've been out in the community and really taking notes about what you need, whether it be Glendora, Almani, Irwindale, Baldwin Park, and we've been trying to make sure that everybody has some representation. Again, we don't get everything, but at least we can get a little bit of what we need, or some answers as to why things are being done. Judy brought up the water issues. Now that is a passion of mine. That was my very first elected position in 1997. I was elected to the Valley County Water Board, and so I was a water guru for about 8 years. And so when Judy and the call came to me about the water issues, I just jumped in, no pun intended, jumped in and figured that was something that I can help with. And so I am in 10 committees, which if you get to know me a little bit, and this is me fired, just so you know. But they put me in 10 committees. I said, okay, there's a couple reasons they put me in these committees. One, they want to keep me out of trouble. Because if I have more time, forget it, I'm going to be running amok up there. But I am very well versed in a lot of things. When I started running for assembly, I started looking at what my qualifications were. And somehow through the years, and I say that God did this, God knew where I was going. I didn't necessarily know, I didn't wake up one day and go, oh, my goal is to be an assemblywoman someday. But so my background is eclectic. I have a business degree from APU, and I was in human resources. I was a business person. I started working for the school district in the human resources department, so I have that background. And during the teacher shortage, I transitioned into being a teacher. And so I had to go back to I have a master's degree in education along with my teaching credential, which was like, I was amazing when I started teaching. I never knew how rewarding it was going to be. I joke also that when I started teaching it, it was literally on Friday, I was in my HR office. Rob can attest to that. Rob was in Baldwin at the time. I was in HR on Friday, and then on Monday, I was in the classroom. And when I was a kid, I was one of those girls that didn't play teacher. I wasn't even like playing teacher. I had no interest in being in the classroom, but when I went into the classroom, I truly found passion. It was just amazing, the ability to be able to influence children, be able to still mold them and inspire them. And so I spent 16 years doing that. In the meantime, I was a school board member as well. And so I've done so much that when the position became available for assembly, I was like, if not me, if not now when. And so I was fortunate enough to be elected and to be your representative. I do have 2 children, so I have not only my professional experience, but those of you with children, you know how much it takes to be able to raise good human beings. And so for me on a daily basis, in spite of, or because of my job, not in spite of, because of my job, I want to make sure that my kids are taken care of. So my kids are in Sacramento with me. We've made it work. The kids started school Wednesday, and I fly home on Thursday night, and they fly home on Friday. So tonight they'll fly, and then we'll be here for the weekend, and we go back on Sunday night because they have school on Monday. And so in spite of me being busy, I was telling Judy that I've got this cool thing that we're doing tomorrow. We're going to go spend the night at the Forever Cemetery in Hollywood. And they put movies, and we're going to, be there at 7, and we won't leave till 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's my way of making sure that my children are also taken care of. I get to do this with you, and you guys are fabulous. But the kids are my primary responsibility, and so I go and do that with them. And so we've made it work. The kids commute back and forth. They think, my son thinks he's all that. He's like, oh, I got this. And they have passports, and they have their, I didn't know, just FYI, and I don't want to bring up the TV story, but the kids, but my children actually have IDs. And I thought that you had to be 16 to get IDs. Well, you don't have to. Kids can get IDs too. And so my children have their own California ID, they have their own passport and all that. And so being here, that the experience that I'm having because of you and because of what I'm doing is incredible, but the experience that my children are getting because they get to do the things that I get to do has been amazing. But I'll get back to the script. I always, and if you've heard me speak many times, I would say that my staff spends hours and hours on my speeches, and then I read none of them. And so I will go back to why I'm here. So I wanted to tell you this is the last week, the last month of session. Our last day of session is August 31st. And so right now it's kind of quiet. We just got back from a month break on Monday, so everybody's kind of just getting back into it. But the last, probably the last 2 weeks, but I know next week's going to be really busy. We're going to be going through the rush job of making sure everything's out of the committees. We've spent the last year making sure that our bills move through the process, and I still have 12 bills. One of them is the water bill, and I still have 12 bills. I started with 32, and so I have a hat, a black hat. I call it my morning hat. It's this big black hat with a little flower, and it's black. And so whenever one of my bills dies, I put it on in my morning I walk around the office, and we just kind of move on. And I do that symbolically, but also I want to tell my colleagues that it's just a bill. There's a lot of maneuvering up there, which I love. Let me tell you, it's amazing. And so some folks, hey, can you help me with this, and I'll help you with that. And so for me, when somebody intentionally kills my bill, which happened, I proudly wear that hat and say, well, I'll try again next year, so that there's no thought that there's leverage. If you understand what I'm saying, there is no leverage. I love everything that I author, but I don't live and die because of it. And so when the bill dies, I just mourn it and move on, which is a symbol for the rest of my colleagues that, okay, it died, let's move on, as opposed to, well, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then we're going to kill your bills. And so it's really an interesting dynamic, and we can talk more about it another time, because it's really, really fun. I feel like I'm playing chess at any given moment. You've got something going here and something over there and something over there, and and truly, sometimes any legislature, not just California, but even the federal government, gets the reputation of what do they call it, horse trading, and it really isn't horse trading, but it is negotiation. You could call it horse trading, but it's negotiations, and sometimes I have something that you want, and you have something that I want, and when we come together, it's negotiation. It's the legislature again gets a bad rap because we do that, but that's what negotiation is. You have to be able to work with everybody else. You have to be able to negotiate and really get what your priorities are. And so the first 2 years, I learned that not everything is a priority. Unfortunately, it can't be. But if I'm passionate about something and I'm dedicated to something that is important to my community, then I'm able to really talk to my colleagues about it. So anyway, so that's kind of like just a little bit about the dynamics in Sacramento, where I'm looking forward to the end of the year, and the fall is the opportunity to speak with all of you about any possible ideas that you have on future legislation, or just fixing something that's not working. I also found that there's a million laws, and a lot of them are quite outdated. It's 2018, and we're still operating under laws that were enacted earlier in the not just this century, but last century. And so I think that this is if I ruled the world, this is what we would do. The first year we would go through all the bills and get rid of all the bad ones, all the bad laws, and then the second year we enact better ones, instead of this rush of 50 bills every 2 years, which is overwhelming. So when you talk to any legislator, and I was joking about this yesterday too, when you say, hey, Bill 3096, I really don't agree with that, and I'm looking at you with like, what is it, deer in headlights? If you look at what you just said, Bill 3096, that means there's 3,096 bills, or 3,095 bills before 3096. And so when you're asking me about Bill 2428, I'm thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's a number. And so if you have any questions about a particular bill, give me the title of the bill, and then I will know. Because if you give me a number, forget it, you lost me. And then I always have to look at it. I'm like, what is it? And so that is in my ear. But we have about 3,600 bills this year. And like I told you, I started with 32 and I only have 12 left. So I want to say about 40% of them have died. So it's not as overwhelming, but then we've got a couple more weeks when a whole bunch more will die. And so anyway, the legislature has every assembly member has the ability to author 50 bills a year, or every 2-year session. And so you times 80, that's an overwhelming amount. But anyway, I'll go back to talking about our wins this year. As a former teacher and school board member, one of my priorities this year for the budget was education, and we were able to invest $97.2 billion in education. I know for our school districts, and as a former school board member, it sounds like it's great, which is fantastic, trust me, but it's still not enough. I used to belong to the Public Safety Committee, and I was reassigned, and if you look at the amount of folks that are being incarcerated, it gives you an idea of how much money we haven't invested in education. Deep conversations happen up there about the correlation between education and incarceration. I can hear myself. There you go. Okay, so we've invested $97.2 billion in education, and Dr. Morris can probably tell you that that's not going to help very much for the district. So this year, it was a big win, and so we're hoping that the economy continues to improve, and we will allocate more money to education the following year. And California has typically been known as we spend, but I was very happy I'm happy to report that we completely filled our rainy day fund, and we've enacted a separate fund to make sure that we have the amount of money that we need in case of, when the other recession hits. The way the Department of Finance described it was, for a mild recession, we need $20 billion in reserve. For kind of a mid-level recession, it's $40 billion, and if we have a drastic recession, it's $80 billion that we're going to be in a deficit. And so we only have about, I think, about $15 billion in reserve. So if you look at the numbers that I just told you, we're not even, we don't have enough for a mild recession, but if we continue on this path, hopefully when the next recession hits, we'll be at least in a position where we don't have to make drastic cuts to you, to your departments, or to the schools like we did in 2011. And so that was a big win for us, I believe. Money, my son said that it does grow on trees. I said, money doesn't grow on trees. And he says, Mom, what is money made of? I said, no, it doesn't grow on trees, Mom. My 11-year-old. And so, anyway, but the point is that we don't have money growing on trees that we can access. How's that we can just pluck and put it into our coffers. So I think that this was a responsible budget, making sure that we put that money into our reserve fund. And then as chair of the I am the chair of the Select Committee on Domestic Violence. I've been kind of touring the state, making sure that we bring awareness to domestic violence. It is a big issue, not just in poor communities. It's a big issue just in communities as a whole. And we were in Fresno a couple months ago, and the stories are the same. The stories are the same up in Northern California and Central California, and the stories are the same in Southern California. Domestic violence is a big issue, but one of the aha moments that I want to share with you, and those of you in education can take that and perhaps figure out what we can do, but we're busy trying to help the survivors of domestic violence, which of course is what we need to do. But the cycle is not going to change if we don't change the perpetrators, which was very difficult for me. My sister is a survivor of domestic violence, and I have to be honest, if I see the man, I don't know how I will react, and I want to kill him, literally, because of what he did to her and what he did to my family. But he's sick, he needs help. And that was very hard for me to connect, because in my mind, he's evil, right? He's evil. I want to do anything possible to hurt him, but then I am going to be exactly the same as he was. And so the reason that I bring that up is when somebody told me, men or women, because it's not just men that are perpetrators, women do it too, we have to teach our young kids, our boys and our girls, that domestic violence is not okay. We have to help them, because a lot of them have been traumatized as when they're kids, and whatever they do to other people, and in this case to women, is a reflection of trauma that they've endured in their life. And so I'm still kind of thinking about it, but I want to just share that with you, because at some point we also have to help the perpetrators, because they are hurting as well. It's very difficult for me to say. And like I said, because I want to kill my ex-brother-in-law, but if I truly am going to be advocating for domestic violence, then I also have to advocate for education and for help for the perpetrators, because otherwise I can help all of the domestic violence victims, but if we don't change the behaviors of those that are doing this, then they're going to do it to somebody else. So that's, I know it's an emotional kind of a big subject to touch, and I'm going to call you all out. The minute I brought that up, people shrink in their seats. And I always point that out because domestic violence affects all of us. And if we don't think about it as a community problem, instead of thinking about it as a household problem, then we're never going to get to the point where we're actually helping everybody. Because I also have a resolution coming up next week. I don't know if you remember the little boy Vicky, who was in the middle of a custody battle, and the mother lives in Baldwin Park, or lived in Baldwin Park, highly educated. She was a principal at a school at LAUSD, very educated woman. The father took Vicky and on one of his weekends, and he disappeared for 9 weeks. Well, turns out his father murdered him. He took him to Disneyland, in the back seat when they were going home, put him in the back seat, and I can't say the word in management, asphyxiated, and basically killed them and devastated his family. And but Kiki was gone for 9 weeks. His body wasn't found. It was found in Kachuma Lake, I believe, 9 weeks later. And what happened in that situation, it was a domestic violence issue. Kiki had told the social worker that his father had hurt him, but because of our laws, the family court said, oh no, the father still gets visitation rights. And we would have Kiki with us today if a judge would have said, let me look at the domestic violence, any previous domestic violence allegations. Perhaps we would have Kiki today. So I have a resolution next week, and it's going to be very, very emotional for me as a mother, but for Ana Estevez, who is the mother of Kiki, to be advocating for help for other families, not to have to go through this. So when we also think about domestic violence, we think husband, wife, we don't think children. And in this case, this was a domestic violence issue, but Kiki will not be in the statistics as a domestic violence victim. He's just a kid that was murdered. And we need to also realize that the kids are affected and they're not in the statistics. But I will leave you with that. I do need some support for that resolution. I'm going to go on the floor and speak on it. It's actually it's in Judiciary Committee right now. If you are on Facebook, Ana Estevez is blasting all the committee members' phone numbers so that you can call and you can just email the Judiciary Committee and express your support for the resolution. It really doesn't do anything, unfortunately. The resolution is just highlighting the fact that we need the courts to really advocate for children. And then in my next session in 2019, I will be introducing some bills to make sure that the courts take into consideration the children and the prior domestic violence, so that kids that are having to go with parents don't have to go anymore. And so I'll stop there on that one. I know I go on and on and on, so if you have any pressing questions, please ask. I love what I do, and I can talk about it for hours and hours, and I know we don't have hours and hours. And when I came here, this was the very first time that I've been here. There's some of you that don't necessarily know me, and there was some discussion as to what would happen if I would come, because I'm a Democrat. Because I'm a Democrat, and what I told Cliff, I said, look, Cliff, I'm a big girl. I represent all the communities, and if you have questions, whether you think I'm going to be offended or not, please ask them. I'm a big girl. I signed up for this job because I wanted to represent them and everybody. And if you have, even if you think if it's just something that you're really upset about, I am here to listen to you, and I will do my best to either answer the question or give you some information as to why things are how they are. I know, in this political climate where nobody's going to be happy, and that's just a reality. And the reality for all of us is that it is a Democratic legislature. And unfortunately or unfortunately for others that are not Democrats, we have opinions as to how things should be run, and we don't always agree. We don't always agree as to what's happening, but I'm here to answer any questions that you would like, and if you want to throw a couple punches off duck when you throw them, I'm good at that too. I've got golden gloves over there now, and so anyway, so if you have any questions, please ask. But I also wanted to tell you that I am the chair of the Human Services Committee, and in this role I oversee legislation related to foster children, adults with disabilities, which is a big deal. I introduced a bill that would help autistic workforce development, and those of you in education, I keep pointing over there. We have great programs to help parents and kids when they're in school if they're autistic or special education. But what happens when they graduate or when we're done serving them, then what? Nobody knows. Nobody can tell me, because what we do, we say, oh, we're done, we serve them, done. But then the kids have to go and find a job, or if not, parents are taking care of the kids forever. And I found that the autistic population, and we all know who they are, they're very smart. It's not, autism doesn't automatically mean that they're not intelligent. If anything, I think it's the opposite. Some of them are more a higher functioning. And so I introduced a bill for an autistic workforce development. There's a lot of organizations like the old folks homes that are hiring a lot of the autistic population, and sometimes it takes very simple changes, like, for example, those lights, the little swirly ones. I don't know if you've noticed, but when you turn off the lights, there's a little noise. Well, the noise is there all the time, not just when you turn it off. And for an autistic child or an autistic worker, if there's a light in the room like that, all they can focus on is that noise. And so sometimes an autistic child or an autistic employee would function perfectly if we would just change that light bulb. And but knowing and being aware that those minor changes can help your employees would make it so much easier. So some companies have stepped up and are hiring and trying to put together a kind of a guide as to how to deal with certain situations with autistic kids. And the ones that have already done it have been very, very successful, and we have really, really good employees in those organizations, and especially in the assisted living homes. Somehow the older adults with the autistic kids, there's some bond. It was amazing, the statistic. They said that those kids spend not just their work time, but they spend their off time with the seniors, and the health of those seniors has increased, or has been better because those kids are spending time with them, not just during the day, but after work, the kids just hang out with them. And so that was really important to me, again, because I'm a teacher, but because there's that segment of the population that we tend to forget about. Once we've served them, when they're 21, we're done, and then we forget about them. And a lot of these parents, and a lot of you know families with kids with special needs, there's a lot of need that they have. And so as a chair of the Human Services Committee, I'm able to invest or help advocate for investment in programs like that. And so that particular program was put in the trailer bill, and it's in the budget, so it's going to be funded so that some of these assisted living homes can hire some of the kids and putting together a guide. So if you're interested in that, we can get you more information on that. Job creation is really important. Since January 2011, California has added 2.7 million jobs to the economy, and we only have a limited amount on the incomes that we have, but most of you know I'm more of a moderate Democrat. I don't even know what the other is, the progressive moderate. In my opinion, as long as we are moving California forward, it's progress. That's how I describe it. But I've been labeled as a moderate Democrat because I'm very sensitive about our business community, and the way I look at it is, if I love my human services programs that that I want to invest in, if I don't have business to to pay taxes and employ folks, then I can't do anything with my programs. So because of that, I'm considered a moderate Democrat, but I believe that businesses serve a really, really important role in our communities. I know it does in yours, and it does in all of our communities. And so I try to make sure that the legislation that is passed, or the vote that I vote on, is helpful to the business community, or at least that it doesn't hurt them as much. I'm also carrying a bill. I'm also carrying a bill for the what do I call it? I don't want to call it trash community. The waste community, but it was because of the relationship I built with Gary, that Gary was like, hey, can you do this for us? And because I've been around and really talking to the community, now Gary felt comfortable enough, and Judy felt comfortable enough to say, hey, can you help us with these bills? So I'm carrying a bill for the waste industry. And this is really important. You have to pay attention to this one, and kind of in my description. So there's a thing called the national sword, China sword. Our trash, I didn't know until Gary told me. 50% of our trash was being shipped to China. According to Cal Recycle, the waste industry has to somehow magically disappear 50% of your waste, of our waste. And it was being shipped to China. Well, in January, China said, suck it, we're not taking your trash anymore. And so now the waste industry is faced with this massive problem And so I'm helping in that respect because I tell my colleagues up there, the environmental community says, well, you're not an environmentalist. I'm like, yeah, I don't want the trash piling up on my streets. So of course, and they said, well, it's very simple. This is what the waste industry has to do. They have to bring the jobs here and build these recycling facilities, and then the problem will be solved. Sometimes you can see it in my face. I'm looking at them like, okay, but what do we do now? Because in their mind, they're done, the problem's solved. But I'm like, no, they can't build a facility overnight. And even in, as fast as construction can happen, it's not going to happen in, what, a year? And so I'm trying to help the waste industry in that solution. At the end of the day, it's your trash, yours, mine, all of our trash that we're sending in the waste industries, taking it, but the environmental community is trying to penalize the waste industry for what we have done, because they can't get rid of the trash fast enough. So that was my vague explanation of that bill. And so we're helping with that. And but again, what the point to my conversation is that if you have any ideas that you think that I can help with, education community, I mean, even just normal people. I think I'm going to do, some of my legislative friends do like contests with high school kids to see if they can come up with a bill that they introduce, and the kids take it all the way from inception all the way through the governor's signing, and there's going to few of them. But you can be those children. You can be my community bills. I'll try to do one community bill a year. And so if you have any ideas as to something that's not working, and then you think, hey, somebody should blank, then let us know. But job creation, but I brought that up because it was all about job creation. So the community is like, well, bring the jobs here. So we keep asking our business community to create jobs here, but we keep hurting the business community where they're taking their jobs somewhere else. And so it's kind of a contradiction sometimes. So it's my job as your representative to smack them over the head and go, come on guys, this is our trash. Or come on guys, this is, if you get this industry out of here, then our jobs are going to go to wherever. So job creation is also a big deal, obviously for you as well, because if you don't have qualified workers, if you're a small business owner or even a big business owner, if you don't have qualified workers, then you don't have a business. And anyway, so let's see. Going back to, okay, I'm going to talk about it. Be nice. The SB1, the gas tax. I'm going to bring it. We have SB1 and cap and trade. 19.2 million traffic management system projects. A traffic management project that will repair ramps in the amount of $19.2 million was sent to Assemblywoman Blanca. I'm going to brag about all the good stuff, and then we can talk about that stuff. We're upgrading traffic signal poles, controller cabinets, signal heads, and signage in the area. I don't know if you've seen the 10 freeway. All of that is, a lot of it is previous money, but the new money is taking care of the 10 freeway. We've got a project on the 605 freeway, the off-ramp on Irwindale. In Irwindale, where all the trucks come off, it was already destroyed, and so we were able to bring money, and that project is going to start really soon. This is where they're going to be repairing those roads. We have the East Almani overhead, and the San Gabriel River Bridge is, we got the San Gabriel Valley, specifically the 48th Assembly District, got $18.6 million from that project. We've got $2.9 million bridge project on the Interstate 10 in the city of Almani. And let's see, I'll bring up the numbers for the cities. We were able to, not just in Almani, but Pomona, and I know kind of Pomona is in this area. Pomona got $35 million. Pasadena $32 million. Almani $26 million. West Covina is getting $24 million. Alhambra is getting $19 million. Baldwin Park $17 million. Montebello $15 million. Monterey Park $14 million. Arcadia $13 million. Diamond Bar $13 million. Rosemead $12 million. Glendora $11 million. Azusa $11 million, Covina $11 million, Puente $9 million, San Gabriel $9 million. That's a lot of money. and which also translates into jobs. When you infuse that kind of money into the San Gabriel Valley, well, somebody's got to build all of these projects. So what's happening is they're hiring a whole bunch of people. It's stimulating the economy. When you hire somebody, it's not just what you pay them. They have to eat, they buy clothes, they go to the local eateries. Now they have more money to buy a new car. Now they have more money to, buy better clothes. And so what I want you to do is when you're looking at that SB1 and that gas tax, I really want you to take into consideration the numbers that I gave you. And they're broken down in different ways. I know Glendora, they're not just getting $11 million, it's based on projects. In Glendora, it's been one of the cities that have taken advantage of the money that's being brought into the community. So when you're looking at the gas tax, I completely understand the whole tax thing, I get it, I really do. However, when you look at that kind of money coming into the community, I really want you to think about what can be done in your communities. New businesses coming in, folks that have more disposable income that can spend it in their businesses, a better quality of life just for the San Gabriel Valley. So on that note, I will take questions on that one, because I know that's a touchy situation, and I'm here to answer or to just listen, if anybody has questions. Come on, please. Yes.
Part of the issue with the other one is that we have to match the funds that we get. And so it's a question of we fix our road here. So,
Yes. And the pensions can be fixed, but it's going to, the matching, right. So the matching funds, we've been working with the governor's office to see where we can get you the matching funds. And I think if you reach out to Leah, she'll tell you where we are in that process, because you and I had a conversation a couple months ago. Yes, not all of it, but some of the money has to be matched. And some cities do have the matching funds, but there are other ways, like through cap and trade. There was that other one from last year, the cap and trade money. There's money that can be accessed through cap and trade to be able to do the matching funds, and we're working with the governor's office to make sure that the regulations are not that stringent, because if the money's there and not everybody's taking advantage of it, we need to be able to disperse it to the communities that are taking advantage of it. So yes.
Can you stand and speak so everybody can hear, please?
If funds are not able to be matched by the local community, what happens?
They go back into the SB1 funds to be accessed by say West Covina can match them, they can access them, but we want to work with you first to make sure that you can access those funds. So the money is not going to go to the general fund. If that was where we were going with the question, the funds are not going into the general fund. What happened was there was another, what they call the lockbox, and it was Assemblymember Chad Mays who said, I will help with the SB1 funds only if we put another provision called the lockbox to where that money doesn't go back to the general fund. Because I know that's been a point of contention through this whole process, is that what happens to that money, they're just using it for the general fund. No, that money does not go back into the general fund. It stays in that pot until another community can access it. But my job for you is to work with the governor's office to make sure that you can get the matching funds so that we don't lose that money, because I can brag about how much money we can get, but if we don't get it, then it means nothing, right? And so I'm working with the governor's office to make sure that that money is accessible, but the money will not go to the general fund. It's in a lockbox, so it's specifically for this purpose and this purpose only, so it's not going to go to the general fund.
I know Jean has a question, Ken. She brought it up to start with, so, and we talked about it here quite a bit. That's the number of bills. Jean?
I'll stand over here so the camera will see the back of my head. And I'm really excited that you talked about how many bills are proposed, because it really irritates me. I'm a business owner for 40 years in town, and every year we have 20 to 100 bills that affect my industry, and same with other folks. And in 16, the Assembly raised from 40 bills to 50 bills they're able to present. So by the time you have all the assembly people and then the senators have 40 each, there's a potential of 5,600 bills that can be presented in a session. Last session, they averaged 37 bills per person, which was 4,840 bills that actually came in. And you're saying 40%, I think it's probably more like 60% go nowhere. So, and I handed you an envelope that you can read later, and it's a proposal that I give to all of our legislators, and I haven't had the opportunity to meet with you, and I will make sure I do that with our association. And I am proposing to every legislator that maybe limit the amount of bills instead of having this massive quantity or, bill. Let's have smaller quality bills. And you could still, with 2,000 or 3,000, you could still do the work you need to do.
Yes.
Instead of having 5,600.
So you like my idea about the first two, get rid of them?
I'm so refreshed, and it's nice to hear somebody talk about it instead of going, there's no way you're going to go anywhere because we love our bills. People want us to produce bills.
Right.
And I bet with other senators, and he has 8 staff members, and they're responsible for 75 bills each. And there's no way in the world that anybody can know what's going on. It irritates me when I have a bill, we all have our bill that we love, and we call your office or our senator's office, they go, we don't know what that is.
Right.
And it's really tragic that
It is,
you keep raising the amount of bills that you can produce instead of lowering it.
Yes. Well, and it was actually 30, and they raised it to 50.
Correct. 30,
Yes.
from 30, you guys have all raised, not you.
Right, but let me tell you, I think what, and hopefully I'm right, but I think what happened was, before this, the term limits changed again. The term limits were 6 years for the Assembly and 8 years for Senate. And what was happening is, and I always describe it this way, the first 2 years of my job, you're trying to figure out what a bathroom is. And, it's like, hey, let me just, what is this place? Where's the bathroom? Like, where do I go get a sandwich? And so that was the first 2 years. The second 2 years, you kind of, all right, I figured it out, I know where the bathroom is, I know what to do. So the second 2 years, people were comfortable and they're like, all right, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and that. And the last 2 years, they were busy running for something else because the term was out. And so they needed another job. And so what was happening is the volume of bills gave them a resume, if you will. And that's how I look at it. It gave you a resume. If you passed, I spoke to, and I will not name him, but I was in LA, and I said, oh, council member, former assembly member, let me introduce you to somebody. And I said, oh yes, he was assembly member. So like, yes, during my tenure, I passed 100 bills. And I was just like, But his value was the number because he was under that 6-year term. So for somebody to pass 100 bills in 6 years, oh my God, that's incredible, right? But it wasn't about the bills, it was about the number of bills. And so my hope, to your point, my hope is that now that most of us, there's some folks that are turning out now that are still under the, well, I know Senator Hernandez is still under the 8-year rule. And there's a few just sporadic, but most of us are already there now for 12 years. So what's happening now, it's not going to be the amount of bills, and this, again, strictly my opinion, just based on what I see, so back then when they were rushing to pass 100 bills, it didn't matter if it was a good bill or not, because guess what? When the effects of that bill came back, they were gone. So they didn't have to answer to, bad legislation. All they knew was like, hey, I have 100 bills. But it doesn't matter if they were ruining your business because it was a gun amount. So what I'm hoping, and I think this is what's going to happen, is if we are not thoughtful about the legislation that we introduce, chances are it's going to come back and bite me. I don't want to be but it's going to, the consequences for me are going to be evident during my tenure. And guess what? I'm going to have to answer for that. During the 6-year term, they didn't have to answer because they were gone. And so what I'm thinking that now that we are all understanding that those bills that have consequences, negative consequences, are going to come back, and I'm going to have to answer to those, I am personally more thoughtful about the bills that I write. I'm not going to, write some bill that's going to, whatever it may be. And so my hope is, and I believe that's the trend that we're seeing just because of the conversations I have with my colleagues, is we don't want the number of bills, we want good quality bills because now it's a legacy. For me, if I can do this MS4 permit thing, that's going to be my legacy, right? So for me, it's more important to work on that particular water issue and be able to save, the cities from bankruptcy because of this MS4, the water legislation. For me, that's more important than 100 bills, because now that's a legacy instead of, I did 100 bills. So to your point, I think that is going to change because of the 12-year rule. The bad bills you're going to have to answer for them when you're there. And you'll be calling them and say, you remember when I called? And 6 years ago, that bill is affecting us this way, and now they're going to have to answer to you. So I'm hopeful, and yeah, I'm with you because it's, quite frankly, it's a lot of work. One day, Judy was there. She was there to testify on one of the water bills. You saw me for what? 5 minutes? And she was there till 9 p.m.? Yeah, from like 8:30 in the morning till 9 p.m. I think, and Judy was in the office waiting for her turn to speak. I think I saw her for a whole 5 minutes because I was running around from committee to committee. She saw me on TV because I was in one committee and another committee. It's a lot of work. Now, I have the energy, not all my colleagues, but we were running from committee to committee, so when you have 32 bills, that's also the amount of work that my staff has to do, the amount of work that I have to do, and quite frankly, and then you do all this work, and the bills die in appropriations. It's like, oh my God, really? We did all of that work, and somebody decided to kill that bill. So to your point, and I will read the letter, I'm hopeful that that's where we're heading, and I will propose that, maybe in a bill, that you do, do cleanup legislation, and then introduce new legislation, so that we don't have the problem that we're talking about.
Other questions? Yes.
Well, you brought up the SB1 tax.
Yes.
Okay, and one of the things that's concerned about this tax is not so much that it is a gas tax, but it's another tax. Okay, it is just one on top of, I don't know how many different things that come down from Sacramento that costs us. And I appreciate the fact that we're fighting to get money for the San Gabriel Valley. But in reality, it's our money.
Right.
Okay, and one of the things that happens is that we give our money to the government, whether it be state, whether it be local, and then we turn around and give it back and spend it back. There's things that we can do with our own money that are more important. And it's not so much that this new tax was put in place, but a lot of it was how it was done. Okay? And the thought didn't go into the fact when we talk about, I just looked something up on the phone to try to get a number, but I couldn't find it. But it talks about the cost per driver. Okay? Well, no one thought about the fact that the cost of orange juice went up because of the gas tax. Okay, the cost of a ream of paper went up because of the gas tax. You put that on top of the fact that we had minimum wage increases. We have increases to the cost of housing. We spend a lot of time, I'm on the committee of the League of California Cities, the housing committee, to talk about the cost of housing, yet we keep making decisions to drive up the cost of housing. We just recently put a requirement in to add solar. And solar doesn't make sense without government subsidies. So everyone in this room is paying for solar if I chose to put solar on my home.
Well, no, but that one is not if you choose, it's a requirement.
Well, on a new home, it's going to be a requirement. But what I think needs to happen is we all, at the government level, need to take a look at what we have. And the question to you is, all of these bills that you're addressing, because I tell people all the time, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, conservative, liberal, moderate, Republican, Democrat, we're all looking to solve the same issues. We just have different solutions. We have different ways to solve them. Domestic violence, I would love to see domestic violence, lowered. but I want to see the bad guys in jail, okay? And so we have different ways of looking at that. And I'd like to see, or ask the question, how many bills have been addressed that saves us money, that puts money back into the pockets of the residents of California, or that looks at business people and actually tries to figure out ways to make our job easier, or make it easier for us to hire people, not subsidize us.
I
Make it
venture to say
easier for
probably
us to
zero.
do things like that.
Yes.
So I think that's the type of thing that we need to be talking about, is that there's a limit as to how much money we can throw at things to try to resolve it.
Right.
And we need to start looking at how it affects everybody, because this gas tax really hurt the people that could afford it the least. I can afford a gas tax, but people that rent property from me can't. And those are the things that I think need to be looked at. We need to look at figuring out ways to save us money.
Right. Well, and to your point, probably zero, and I have to be really honest, probably zero bills are on there to save money. I mean, that's just reality as a business owner, and I know you know, is the regulations that are put on you add cost to whatever you're doing. And in some cases, I've been up and down state, and I've been visiting a lot of like the farms, for example, agriculture, all of those folks. They're really hurting as well. And none of the bills that we're passing are designed to save you money. I'm going to be honest. That's not kind of in the trajectory, if you will. But the reality is that unless we have a willing audience, the legislature, for example, to look at and really sit down and go through the budget, for example. When the budget is not 3 days, 24 hours, 18 hours, and then you're going through the budget, I think, for me, I think the budget has to be looked at more carefully. But more than that, the accountability of whatever we enact has to be there. And I'll give you an example. I sit in the Budget Sub-1 Committee, which is Health and Human Services. Do you remember Prop 63, the millionaire tax? So Prop 63 was designed to tax the millionaires, and that money was going to go into a pot that would help for mental health services. Sounds great. So we had a hearing, an accountability hearing, and they're getting afraid of me a little bit, but it turns out that there's $2 billion, not million, billion. $2 billion. I do this because I want you to understand that it's $1 billion. There's $2 billion of that money that has not been used. It's in somebody's, so the counties are not using it. And when we had this hearing, I was asking for accountability. So there's a couple things, right? So we are not enacting legislation to save money. And that's just the reality. And I can't defend it, that's just how it is. However, as a legislator, I need to hold those people accountable. So when I go into a committee hearing and we talk about how $2 billion haven't been used and it's sitting somewhere, then it's my job to make that department or those folks accountable for why that money hasn't been used. And so that's one point, right? And then we all know we have a homeless issue or a homeless problem. I venture to say that, about 60% of the homeless folks have mental health issues, right? So we had a whole bunch of mayors that went up to Sacramento and said, give us, I don't know how many billions of dollars so that we can address the homeless issue. And it was like a couple days right before this hearing, and so I'm in committee saying, wait a minute, you're telling me that we have $2 billion in funds to address the mental health services for the counties, and yet they're in reserves. Like, I think it was like all of them have them in reserves. And so I was not very nice, and I said, how can you look at me and how can I go to my constituents and say, I'm asking you for another tax when there's $2 billion that haven't been used? And so the committee was like, well, assembly member, and I have to do this because it's quite comical to watch them. And if you've ever gone Cal Channel and watched one of those, it's very, very interesting. They're like, well, assembly member, it's the process is very difficult. Right? And then I'm like, because I'm a teacher, I'm like, I'm sorry, but can I ask you a question? Who creates the process? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, You just stated that the process is very complicated and it's difficult. Who creates the process? We do. I said, so, let me just clarify. You're telling me that the reason we have $2 billion in reserves of this money that hasn't been used is because the process is so difficult. However, you're the one that creates the process. So can we start all over again and have this conversation again? And they're like, and so then we get to the conversation about what they're going to do to make sure that that money is released and that, that it's dispersed so that folks that drastically need those services are being served, right? So yes, I agree with you. I think the accountability piece is missing because there's pots of money everywhere that have not been used. There was another example, I was in a committee meeting where the suicide prevention line last year, because this is already my second year, so last year the suicide prevention folks came and said, we desperately need money to upgrade the system, we don't have the resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we allocated, I believe it was $4 million, total of 12, $4 million last year, $4 million this year, and $4 million the following year. And we're all proud going, yes, we're going to give them $4 million. So in the accountability piece, when we were going in the committee, the director of the program says, I had already heard that they hadn't used the money, and so of course if I'm asking a question, I already know the answer. And I said, so what happened with that money? And she says, oh well, they're using it right now. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that the money hasn't been used. She's like, yes it has. And then the folks from the suicide prevention line were in the audience and they're going, no. And I said, wait a minute. I said, you're telling me that you already gave them the money and the folks back there are saying you didn't. Which one is it? And she's like, we did give them the money. I said, oh, well, and this is not my first rodeo. So I was like, well, you know what, just so we don't have this conversation here, I want to call you in my office so that we can talk about, the discrepancy, because you're saying you gave them the money, the folks back there are saying that you didn't give them the money. And she's like, and you can see the sense of relief, like, God, I'm done. And I look over to the Department of Finance and I said, did they give them the money? And the Department of Finance says, no. She literally jumped out of her seat. She said, I misspoke. And I said, while you're misspeaking, folks are dying. And guess what happened? That money was immediately released to the suicide prevention. And so they got last year's money and they got this year's money. So yes, but the bureaucracy, and it's bureaucracy everywhere, we all know that it exists. But if I, as a legislator, I'm not holding folks accountable for these programs, but it also takes my staff to know where these pots of money are, because we're used to this, out of sight, out of mind, and we're so busy and we count on that. The established, and I don't mean establishment as in, the politicians. I mean, some folks have been in those jobs for 30 years. They've been through how many of us already, and they figure, oh, they're going to be gone. They're getting, this one thinks she's feisty, and she's going to call me right now, but if I wait her out for 6 years, right, because during 6-year term limits, then she'll be gone, and then some new person's going to come. They're going to ask me the same thing, and then I just keep pushing them up. So now it's my job, because I'm going to be there for the next 12 years, to do the research and find how many pots of money are available for you, and for all of us to take advantage of these programs. Mental health services. I mean, how many of you can agree that $2 billion is ridiculous to have in some fund when we have a crisis of homeless folks that need mental health services? And so at that point, it's my job to do that research. So it's not the answer, quite the answer that you wanted, but my answer to you is that there are pots of money, and I will commit to making sure that we do research on what has been used and what hasn't been used, and I will call them out if it hasn't been used. Why haven't we used these monies? Because you're right. Budget, if you look at the budget, there's that pot of money, but how much money is in all of these different departments and it's not necessarily being misused, it's just not being used at all. And so maybe we can find the money that you need for the matching funds in some other pot that hasn't been used. So that's kind of my roundabout way of telling you that I'm committed, and the more I do it, and it's an interesting dynamic, I think, with the whole Me Too movement. In this particular committee, I'm the only female. Well, the head of the department was a female. So my male counterparts were like, just, not because they didn't want to ask, but because now they're going to go after a woman, right? And the minute I engaged, they're like, oh, she did it, okay, and then they went after her. And we're not going after her as a female, we're going after her as the head of that department. And so it's also a cultural thing that my male colleagues don't feel comfortable enough asking or appearing to be attacking, per se, a woman, because it's not, and it's all televised, right? So it only takes somebody to take a clip and go, oh, look at this, guy, look at what he's doing to this poor woman. But when I did it, then it gave them a pass to ask those questions that I didn't think about. And so we had a really, really good several meetings. And so this week it happened again. I sit on the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and we were auditing, or to audit the employee EDD. So what's happening is, if you are on any form are getting EDD services, your social security number is still printed on the forms, and guess how it's delivered to you? Snail mail, in that little window envelope, right? Have you ever done that to the window envelope and kind of figure out what's in there? I've done it, right? And so people's information is being exposed, and the excuse was, well, it's an old system. It's going to cost about $30 million to fix. I'm like, I think my 11-year-old might be able to help you with that. With coding and all of these, these kids are brilliant. I'm like, don't give me the excuse that removing social security numbers from a document is that complicated. I don't know. And I'm not a computer person, but I venture to, say that if I took a stab at it, I could figure it out. And so holding those people accountable is what's lacking. Yes, there's money, we're taking a lot of your money, but because we're not holding folks accountable, those monies are sitting somewhere, so it looks to the normal person that we don't have money in that particular area. When we do, but it's just tied up somewhere in some bureaucracy. And so what we should write, it's that bill about everybody has to, I'm working on it. Zero-based accounting is a new term. So I'm working on a bill that makes sure that all of those folks show us how much money they have, where they have it, before they can come and ask us for more. And so if that goes through, if we can figure that out, maybe that's the path that will get us back to the not charging you any more money and really using the money that is available at that time. So we're working on this project. So anyway, but I'm available at any time for conversations. The next 3 weeks are going to be really, really busy. So if you call the office, you can talk to staff if you want. But if you want to talk to me, you call and you leave me a message. And after August 31st, I will make sure that I return your phone call. We can have coffee, we can have lunch, and or I can. This is okay, but I think some of you have questions that are more, personal or more to your particular issue, and I'm available. I'm here on Thursdays, Thursday nights, Fridays, Saturday, and Sundays, and if I'm serious about the offer, call, I will have coffee with you and we can discuss, I have weekends, I'm here on weekends, and I do my stuff at 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. with the kids. But I'm available for coffee, for lunch, whatever it is, if you want to talk to me about a particular issue, and I know some of you have had that coffee with me already, and so my goal is to be available to you at any time, via phone or in person. So I would love to sit down and talk about the particular issues, and we can, possibly come up with some good solutions to what we're talking about and some bill ideas for next year. So thank you. If you have any other questions, more than happy to answer them. If not, thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you today, and I hope that this is not the last time that I'm here, and whenever you invite me, if we can fit it into the schedule, I will make sure that I'm here. It might be 3 months out, but I will come back.